We got one hell of a good game here. We have got Lenok versus Nevix playing on his account called Kexchoklad, which apparently is Swedish for Chad. But we're going to have to find out if it's a Chad or is a Chode as we hop into King of the Hill. Let's get on the way with this one. And this one, I mean, this should be interesting. Mongol on Mongol on King of the Hill as well. It's kind of weird, actually. It feels like Mongol, we're seeing less and less of it. I think people just got sick and tired of it. And when it got nerfed, they felt like less necessity to play it regularly. But King of the Hill used to be one of those maps originally like people perceived to be really good for the Mongols. Little did people realize just how reliant back in those days this Civ was going to be on wood and how limited wood was going to be on this map. And sometimes the generations, it has to be said, are actually just like brutal for the Mongols. I always think of the recently in 4C, the 3DB versus Mr. one. That was absolutely painful to watch. He had to roll a quarter to a third of the map just to find himself a wood line. And it hurt his timing so much. It is something that I think the developers said they're working on is actually addressing the spawns because they noticed the wood is a little bit too budgeted. But it's why I don't really rate Mongols and Rus especially as like high-value civs to pick on King of the Hill. I think actually King of the Hill, it's a weird one. I think in a lot of ways it still hasn't been solved. And it's why quite frequently in tournaments, in like high-level pub plays, we see it either skipped or the games play out weird or it just doesn't like appear at all in competitive scenes as well. So kind of curious to see what can happen here because I feel like most of the time if France was in this, I even said that like a Frenchman, France is in this, I would expect them to be like the dominant force. Rus have some weird kind of anglings. Like I said, I think they're one of the weakest. Arabicids as well is kind of a peculiar one, but I think because of their TC booming, they can actually risk villages out on the loose wood lines. Mongols specifically, though, I think it's a weird one because what we've been identifying with the Mongols is there actually might be value in going multi-TC now. And we definitely got like a perfect preview of that out of Salami after we fast castled and then traded for the additional wood to buy a second TC. Because remember, the Mongols, they pay a ridiculous, astronomical amount of wood. That is more wood than you'll find in a dildo shop right there. 900 wood to build a town center. That is a phenomenal ask at most, if not all stages of the game. And that's why most players have always like looked at TC and turned their nose up and went, no, I will not do that. Once again, I don't know why I'm going French. So I'm kind of curious to see if we're going to get that out of either of them. To open up with, though, it is going to be a Rax from one side, but not from the other. So Lenok is going for kind of like the tried and true, the Old Testament at time choice, which is in the Mongol matchup, you almost always both go Rax. And then you just have this really dumb trade of me have Pokey Stick, you have Pokey Stick, me not like Pokey Stick. But instead, it seems like Nevix is just forgoing that. And Nevix, he did admit, like, you know, he's a little bit new to the Mongol side. He's trying to figure it out. He's trying to learn the Civ in more depth. And one thing that has to be highlighted is at a high level, you almost always see Rax on Rax. You either see a Rax or you see an opening of pasture. But right now, the interesting part is if you look at this Nevix, well, he went on the gold earlier because he wants that quicker tech up. But that means he had to invest into this Gur. And the Gurs are very pricey for the Mongols. Remember, they function as a drop-off for any resource, but they cost 100 wood. And this means he will unlock Deerstone, but he might come under pressure. And this might be to his advantage, but it will possibly cost him the Oovoo. The whole point being is because he gets a quicker tech up, he will unlock the archery range, and he sees his opponent has already invested in the racks. But the interesting part is how kind of misskewed and off a little this feels to Lenok. He's only pushing 4 spearmen to try and assassinate an Oovoo, and he might be able to burn it down in time. In fact, he will be able to burn it down in time because there's only 4 villagers here right now from Nevix. And I think that this is a little bit of a missed trick, right? If your opponent shows aggression on the Oovoo, I think what's happening right now in Nevix's mind, he isn't expecting the second round of Spearmen. So instead of doubling down on the build-up rate to then get an archer range quick enough, instead, he's playing ultra slow to maximize his economy right now. I do love that, though. Good garrison assassinates the Khan. But only 4 villagers on this means he should end up losing this Oovoo. It will at least set on fire, and that will at least give over 50 resources, 25 food and 25 gold to Lenok. In the meantime, Nevix is like, look, mate, you might be at M4C, but I don't let my Khan die. Say that as it's slowly being mauled to death by the bitey infantry. Lenok will pull back that villager back to the safety of gathering underneath the TC. No switch over into pastures just yet. And that's the fragile state I'm looking for because both players are going to have a really wonky phase of this. And it's why it's important that like you have the lead, that you have your opponent pressured. Because one person is going to be kind of pressured when they're going into this pasture and it's going to stretch their economy very thin. And the other one's going to be full on cruise mode, just building pastures in the back of the base with no pressure on their eco. But as it stands, Like we said, as soon as it gets raised, it's going to burn down. And this is kind of the wonky part. So one trick that Nevix could have potentially done here is, given the vision, he might have been able to spot the aggression on the Oovoo quick enough. And understanding like how slow his tech up was going to be, if he was willing to accept that he wasn't going to build this Deer Stone twice as quickly, he should have just deleted the Oovoo before it was touched. Because the moment that the Oovoo is, or any building in fact, is touched by a Mongol unit, any damage is done. If you delete it, they get the raised food and gold. So they get the 50 bounty. However, if you get rid of it before they attack it even once, then they can't actually, like, you know, they can't get any resource out of it. And it means that you won't be able to give over that extra differential. It's actually a really important little detail, to be honest, because something that people don't think about is in mirror matchups, you know, we talk about the whole idea of small differences make the world a difference, right? But where it matters even more is in the Mongol matchup. The Mongol matchup is a lot more snowball, I find. And the reason is because if you ever find value in exploiting your opponent's building positioning to burn them down, it's not just a deficit of whatever they paid to build that building. It's then an increase in your economy. So that small difference becomes even bigger compared to if we had a France on France matchup where you maybe be talking about the importance of assassinating villages more so than burning buildings. And there has been an admittance coming out. This is the beautiful thing when you've got the player in your chat watching the replay, looking for the assessment. He didn't notice the stone to his south. I hadn't even got onto that. Originally, like, because I think you went for the initial build because you were closer originally with your TC. But yeah, this would have been a better choice. You would have been able to defend this, and it's towards a natural choke point as well. So you would have forced a more uncomfortable positioning coming out from Leenock. But value gain, and he did go for the racks in the end, and I'm not the biggest fan of that. I mean, you see the Horseman coming, but I prefer maybe just going Horseman Archer or Horseman Spear. I'm a little bit concerned about whether you're going to reach critical mass now. And also, the other concern I have is Leenock can just do this with the Horseman. He can wrap round and do this again. And now all of a sudden, Nevix has just realized that he needs to tell Alexa to play Benny Hills. Because he might be forced to keep running back to his base to address this. For the moment, only one Horseman coming in, so Leenock will get the upgrade in a Hardened Spearman. An upgrade that is now finally coming out for Nevix, and it looks like Leenock was not paying attention. That's going to be a whoopsie-daisy. Ooh, he just about gets away. A little bit frustrating. But Nevix feeling like he needs to apply pressure, and I think quite rightly so. You can tell he's definitely behind. In fact, if we look at the income per minute, you can see Leenock is leading in a lot of regards. And overall, just ahead economically, right? Like, it's a one eco lead, but it's a difference of, like, where you are at. Like, you're being forced to transition through Nevix right now. Meanwhile, Leenock right now is just sitting here asking you to do something. And all the while, he's now prepped himself for the Holy Triangle. He's got all three. So now he has the edge once again, and Nevix has to make the choice. Do I double down on X or Y unit, or do I create the triangle as well and build a stable? And the problem with building a stable at this stage that can feel a little bit finicky is this. The upgrade is already there for Horseman. If he now drops a stable, he then has to delay his initial Horseman to get them from early stats to give them the extra health. Otherwise, it just feels very uncomfortable. And it already feels a little bit uncomfortable. As Nevix will pressure in. We'll get through the archers because he does have the advantage on that count right now. And that will force Leenock backing away for the moment. And remember, this Oovoo, this whole military district is exposed. Remember what we said, folks. The big differential here. It's not just the 150 wood you lose from building this building and it being burnt down. It's then the 50 food, or rather 25 food and 25 gold that goes away your opponent. So, Leenock later into the archers, but the concern I have for Leenock right now is he's lacking reserve stone. And interestingly enough, Nevix is floating a lot of additional stone, and this is all because his archery range is not over at the Oovoo. Otherwise, he'd be doubling up production there. Instead, the only thing he can do double of is spears, and he needs them to get rid of this aggression we talked about that is once again over there, just being a complete pain in his ass. Oh, this does get frustrating. I mean, you have to waste so much time addressing this. You can't even let it get that close to the 25% mark. You don't want it to be set on fire. Instead, we'll have to peel back. Archer will move out as well, but one isn't going to be good enough, and he has to fall back fully, and that means Leenock can now go on the offensive again. And the Horseman is the concern once more. Your static force versus this dynamic force. Yes, the Archer count was more healthy and remains more healthy for the moment for Nevix, but the concern really is the Horseman can kind of dictate and choose where they want to fight. Even with the Yam movement speed, you're still going to be slow to respond, because right now the only place that's giving you Yam is this Deerstone. There's no outpost over here near your racks. And that's another thing that's really important. When you go for this Oovoo play, when you're looking towards Yam speed in the early game, you really want to have this networked underneath it, right? Like usually the kind of formation you're looking for is a deer stone should probably be over on this side so that you're maximizing your economy, but then you're also pushing your new military units to the front quicker. Because right now, these spearmen are coming out, and instead of getting like, 10 plus seconds of juiced up movement speed, they're just slogging it around at old man speeds at 1.25 tiles per second. So that's the difference, really. Like, it's surprising because Lenok didn't really optimize either. His Deerstone hasn't moved from the back, but I think the difference maker here for him is obviously he has the Horseman. So he doesn't have to use the Yam to the same extent, because he always has the Horseman that can move faster and force, like, the undesirable maneuvers out of Nevix. But there we go. Archer range finally moving across that we talked about. Tech up is going to be slightly delayed compared to Lenok, but considering where he was against Big Lee a few minutes ago, this is still acceptable out of Nevix. And also, I believe he prepped more pastures. He had to as well. That's what's delayed him. I think a lot of this game, and I'm sure Nevix is like there stringing his chin, but realized it in the chat as well. A lot of this game so far has come down to like optimization of Oovoo. And the fact he didn't notice the southern outcropping. Had he noticed the southern outcropping, this is actually close enough to your base to drop pastures. And it means that you would have got a quicker tech time in because you wouldn't have wasted an extra 450 wood compared to your opponent to get similar amounts of economy, right? That's actually the big detail, I think, that there's mattered here. And that's why Lenok unlocks castle quicker. And as it stands as well, like military, they are matched, but that slight lead can snowball somewhat. And also, keep in mind like the military district prep. Where did the stable go? Wait. Oh, it's there. I'm blind. I was about to say, I thought the stable moved somewhere else. So, looks like it is going to be double racks into the man-at-arms, and Nevix hasn't prepped similarly. He's still 1-1-1. This could be a Lancer play, though. I like the idea of a Lancer play. He's been holding a lot of stone, and I assume this is the main reason he's been doing so. We talked about earlier it being because he couldn't double produce archers, but now, like, it's the swings and roundabouts. Just because something looked crap at one point doesn't mean it remains crap, because now you unlock new value. And that new value can be double Lancer production at a rate that Lenok shouldn't be able to match at the initial phase of Castle. In the meantime, Spearman just doing their dance to the north, just trying to get that extra little bit of wiggle room for Nevix. And Nevix hasn't shown his next step just yet. Wait a second. I'm hoping it's not. Ever since that salami game, now when I see a marketplace coming out from a Mongol player, I get paranoid that they're going for a second TC. I think this game would be a little bit of a mistake for it. So I hope that's not the case. The reason it'd be a mistake is because you're too wood limit. We talked about this on this map, right? Like there's no wood nearby. So look how far he has to move for the new wood line. And this is also going to leave him very unprotected. So like in theory, you could drop a secondary TC over here, but I don't think his gold is healthy enough right now. Maybe in a few minutes it's an option, but I think like with you already being slightly behind and with the pressure coming out, like you need to use your initial stone as he is with the Lancers to now apply pressure and box Lenok in. And that's the edge you do have, like we said. Man-at-arms are coming out on both sides, and I do think with the crossbows in there, I like Nevix's composition a bit more. It feels like Lenok hasn't really clocked this just yet, because if we look back in his base, yeah, he's upgrading the archers. I'm not the biggest fan of this. I'm starting to think that Lenok didn't notice the crossbowmen in the formation. I mean, there's a lot of gold there. You see gold, you see red. You don't necessarily clearly see the crossbows. It's not like Arbaletier is a lot more obvious. But I feel like if he saw the arbors, if he saw the crossbowmen rather, like, would he not get a second archery range and then get crossbows and then maybe limit the man-at-arms production? Okay, he has now. That's good. I was about to say, like, I'm thinking about like this from like a kind of mirror perspective in the moment, because obviously like vision limitations. So he is adapting, which I like to see. Obviously, you expect this out of one of the best players in the game, in the world, in fact. And now, yeah, there we go. Crossbows are now coming out. So he did go for the Archer upgrade, just because it's quite cheap, right? The Veteran Archery upgrade is not that expensive, as you can see on this number. So if you have like 8 to 10, it's worthwhile. But after that, definitely crossbows. So I'm glad the Big Lee's identifying this. I mean, he's a bigger brain cookie than me, so he definitely knows better than me. And he's expanding now into this southern wood line, which right now hasn't been aggressed at any stage. In fact, I don't feel like the vision advantage is really there. Like, yeah, that's a little bit concerning. So the Khan only just respawned. Did he respawn? I mean, no, he was alive. I don't know why it was doing... it's because when I switched. It looked like he respawned. I just knee-jerk reacted to that. But the Khan isn't getting any info, because right now he's playing very defensive. So you need to actually wrap here. This could be a really good fight. If you can assassinate the Khan, it's big. The Lancers aren't going to be quick enough. It's the maneuver arrow factor that makes it a little bit too hard to gap close right now. So instead, Lenok will be able to back away. And I feel like Nevix kind of has to get on the offensive soon, right? It's one of the annoying things of especially Mongol and Mongol is you play towards kind of like a similar tempo. You dance the dance with each other. It's very hard to kind of net that lead that then leads to you kind of like leaving nothing in your base and going full in. Especially if your opponent is still playing partial cavalry. Because it's not like you can just wall yourself in. You're not the Rus, you're not, you know, the Abysses or whatever. And that would have been very useful in this type of situation. It's another potential weakness of Mongols because there is a lot of flanking power in this map. And even though you've got these thin choke points, like other civs would optimally wall in, you don't have that option. Right now, Lancers are going to aggress onto the Khan. Leenock going to ride in on the villager that is building up the outpost. So that should be an easy pick. And the Khan will peel off, leaving this poor little villager to his fate next to the horseman. I don't think Nevix... There we go. He'll finally notice as it dies. You need to get some trade value now. However, an outpost is already up here. Crossbowman in position as well. Could be a little bit problematic over here. Leenock, he did get sniped in there. Nice move there. Nevix was able to cut him off. This is actually a big deal. If he can make a move in the next 2 minutes, this could cripple Leenock. And now Lancer bites off more than he can chew. I appreciate Nevix looking for the in, but this is now difficult. Because Leenock preemptively built up defenses here, right? I feel like these defenses from Nevix were a little bit later. And this is something I've highlighted a lot before, is like if you assume there's going to be any like aggression. One thing I've noticed from a lot of high-level players, the transition, right, from the previous mindset is like preemptive outposting compared to like reactionary outposting. It's very hard to get these outposts up in time now. Players have just got a lot better at like min-maxing their kind of aggression at different phases, and it actually denies a lot of opportunities for you to like reactionary outposts at this phase of the game. So that's why Leenock is like a little bit better postured, right? Like he knew he'd need this wood line. Meanwhile, Nevix, because he's a little bit later across here, the outpost didn't come out until after the second attempt at the Khan going in. That does mean that right now Nevix is slightly behind. Leenock now with the 1 eco lead. How many people in gold? Yeah, so Nevix is utilizing a few more people in gold. He's a little bit fragile though, because, yeah, he's been forced into that. Okay, that's not a good feeling. So usually the way you want to deal with gold veins is you want to have like this natural flow as the Mongols. You're trying to min-max, right? You want as little time as possible without you gathering from a step readout. So anything that takes you off the path, the daisy chain of like an optimal route is bad. And the issue he had is because he started off this gold vein here, he falls back to the safer one. When realistically, like if you're able to posture in the center, you want to be able to move on these central gold veins. I think that would have been better, especially with the outpost going down. You've got like a foothold here. Meanwhile, like Leenock, I think, where was his initial gold? It was around here, right? And then he moves across this one. It's not that big of a jump for him. And then he's still going to be able to move to much closer gold veins on his side. So it's going to be basically what I'm getting at is it's going to be a lot more downtime for Nevix when he depletes this gold vein compared to Leenock when he depletes his, which he just has. And then he can just instantly roll over to the big gold veins. Whereas if you were over here, like you're never losing really any time on your gold gathering because these two gold veins are so close together. It is really dangerous in some games, but I think considering the way Nevix has played this and the way he's placed the Oovoo, like he's actually well postured to control this central area. Like the Sacred Site is also up for contention. I would love to see him drop a prayer tent just to cap that and force Leenock to come out. But Leenock, he's already posturing as well. Deerstone moving forward, outpost going down. But right now, I do feel like Nevix is slightly stronger with his positioning, and he will wrap around ahead of Leenock. Leenock. Oh, wow. Okay. He spotted the Lancers in the back, but that means he's out of position. That means he's forfeiting the high ground. And if anyone has watched Star Wars Episode 3, they know how that story ends. Leenock shaking his head right now, saying, I'm not an Anakin. He's about to turn into one. As Nevix is looking to turn on the Obi-Wan. As he senses that disturbance of force, he senses an opportunity to move in. No, he didn't sense the disturbance. Instead, the Mangonels, they don't take the right shot. They missed an opportunity to hit the condensed group of infantry. And now the maneuver arrow chasing forward, trying to get close as quickly as possible. Because they don't have the Yam anymore. They will make it in. The Mangonels being targeted out. One being brought down. Second one to be hit up next. Villagers have to peel off and away, but the Mangonel does not have the same luxury. That will be going down. And damage done. A heavy hit. Leenock paying the price. And now this step readout. No longer gathering. This is crippling for him. And this was an important moment. Leenock, he gets baited to the back because he sees 4 Lancers there. He's paranoid. Instead of peeling off a small group of spearmen, he sends the whole contingent back, and all of a sudden, his economy is going to grind to a halt. This is painful. And yeah, great reaction out of Nevix. He has the strong point. He has the high ground. So what does he do now? Don't double up the Mangonel production. Double up on the Springle side of things. Understand your opponent is now going to counter siege. Build Magos, but you've already got one on the field. He's having to play catch up after losing 2 siege weapons, so you need to leverage your advantage and defend it instead of being too greedy with more Magos. Fight on the way. Springles rolling in. Big mistake made. It gets baited back. Nevix didn't notice it. Second one's going to have to roll back a little bit here, but the man-at-arms are in on top of the crossbowmen trying to hold their own. Archer's making the difference here right now. Mago's not finding the maximum impact shots. The Wallow comes out, but sniped just in time. Leenock not able to get the conversion out. Front line is folding for Nevix, though. It looked like an even trade, but it turned around quickly. The military production in Leenock's own base gives him the edge, and Nevix will be pushed back. And he'll need to regroup with a fallback. And really, yeah, the Sacred Site, honestly, like, it's just there. It's crazy to think that the Leenock, even with it further away from him, he played into that variable. He's been banking the relics. There's no value right now for Nevix. Nevix hasn't gone for this at all. Instead, increasing the military production, but just not getting that passive gold when he not only has the Sacred Site in his favor, but he clearly and easily had 3 relics within his zone of influence. So definitely a missed opportunity to get the passive gold trickle and force Leenock to uncomfortably come towards him. And it would have been a good move as well. I think after you actually push him off the step redoubt, try and burn the step redoubt, but start to fall back, and then build into that economy scaling side of things. But instead, now, all of a sudden, Leenock can ride out and apply deep pressure, and he is building into the Rams, something we don't frequently see at the Mongols, as usually they just amass Mangonels. It is a cheap and effective solution, especially if you think your opponent is going to invest heavily in the Springles. I should also point out, I quite like Rams as opposed to Magos as a pseudo, like, siege, if you think your opponent is playing heavy into cavalry, which we see that Nevix is. Reason being that Magos struggle to find maximum impact value against these Lancers. For a start, they have a lot more health than, like, infantry. They also move a lot quicker. They're a lot more finicky. And fair point actually made by Nevix. Like, we didn't even identify he'd done this. We said this might be an option, but Leenock, he snaked multi-TC. He went free. What the? Okay. I was like, why did he move the primary T? No, this is free TCs. And Nevix never knew about this because I don't think he ever scouted it in the game. Realized it afterwards, but in the moment he didn't realize what he was against here. As Leenock started to heavily scale his economy, and this was a very recent choice. After he takes that good fight, after he's still got a standing army, he doubles down on the eco-scaling, making sure that if he can't win the game now, he'll win it in 10 minutes. Oh, man. Talk about exploitative play. And Nevix, well, while he has that cavalry component is needed in the main fight, which means it's not flanking into the eco lines at all. And this is looking quite worrisome. Wrap around the back from a group of Lancers onto the crossbows, but there is the armor factor. Makes it harder to clap them down quickly. And they are getting the better trades. These Lancers, definitely a price unit to be falling so easily. They're decently dishing out damage against the crossbows, but at the end of this fight, I think we know who's going to be standing still. It's going to be Leenock barely, though. As it looks like his crossbow's down to 5, actually. There's more Lancers coming in. Nevix pushing him back. And all because of that double TC choice by Leenock. It is going to serve him well in the next 5 to 10 minutes, but right now, he has crippled his military production. And the reason he crippled his military production isn't because he doesn't have surplus, folks. It's because he doesn't have the buildings. Look at his numbers right now. Look at his buildings. This is the difference right now. Nevix, he started to scale this, right? He went for more racks. He dropped additional stables. Like, he's trying to get more military buildings. Leenock delayed this. So he's playing for a long time the same number of military buildings. It meant he wasn't able to churn out additional troops quick enough to match his now superior economy. This will now be fixed, though. And Nevix, I feel like you have to make a move soon. Like I said, I don't necessarily think he's going to go as aggressive as we think. But now that he sees the TC now, the Khan scouted out. So he knows he has to go. Like, the window's closing. He's on the time. His win condition is ending the game in, like, the next 3 minutes. He needs to either immediately just extract value out of this eco line and annihilate it, or he needs to go straight into the base, deny the step redoubt, and burn down the military district. Leenock's win condition is just surviving. Like, at this stage, just dragging the game out will benefit him a lot more. And Lancer's riding in. Village is in a bit of a pickle, but pull away. Spearman, scare Nevix away from the commitment. He didn't want to wrap through the other side. That choke point can be deadly. Now he'll move in. The Magos are in range, and this is where Leenock gets a little bit paranoid. Springle's able to snipe out. Good trade initially. So, ooh, Mago shots. Misplayed there. And the front line isn't going to hold. There's not enough troops here to block out the rush in. They gap close Leenock on top of them. One Mangonel down. Second one soon to fall. And now, no anti-clump in place. Leenock, although he's outnumbered for the moment, he can repel the forces one by one as they move out. Crossbows trying to hold their own against the Lancers. Lancers wrapping around again. Nevix looking like he might have the edge. But remember, it's the home field production advantage now that Nevix has to deal with. And Nevix, although he has somewhat of a full base, most of it is still running all the way across. So it still takes him a long time to arrive. Big Lee has to back up for the moment. Was this triple TC play a little bit too greedy? His eco, in theory, is very strong, but it doesn't look very strong. Too many villagers getting assassinated. He barely has an eco lead right now. And remember, his step redoubt isn't gathering. Not only is he not getting any gold, but that eco differential is closed by the fact that you have 50% more workers working on this gold line because of the 50% additional drop-off at the step redoubt. It means that despite the fact that Nevix is still on 1 TC, he is actually matching Lenok's economy. But he's not gaining ground, and this is the concern. It's hitting a stalemate. And as we said, the longer this drags out, the more it should benefit Lenok, unless Nevix can wrap in to his economy lines. However, his economy lines right now keep coming to him as they build the Oovoo in the center. Murdering continues through. Crossbows going into some weird animation. They'll use the torch for the moment, but they're cleaning up. And these man-at-arms aren't going to cut it. The Magos are being built up now. They could be the difference makers. Mainly, it's just cannon fodder on the front line for Lenok. He's relying heavily now on the crossbowmen to defend him. I have to feel like if you switch over to spears right now as Nevix, this might serve you better, because it's mainly crossbowmen being pushed by Lenok. Crossbowmen that will dodge out the Mago shots. And that one's going to fall, and that other one hasn't been completed yet. So Nevix in a little bit of a problem here. Stuck in a corner, needs a way out, needs it quick. I don't know, this Mago has somehow survived on 6 HP, but now that comes to an end. Will be cleaned up. Crossbows hit once more. Lancers riding in. Lenok trying to scale continuously here. Khan has risen again. And now Lenok, with his Khan moving out, this could be the difference maker. This could be the coup de grace he needs to push Nevix out of this game. Because so far it's been a stalemate, but it's been a stalemate due to a lack of Khan on one side. Nevix once again forced to retreat, but he can't retreat too far, remember. His gold gathering is on the front line, so he needs to hold there. And this isn't your normal civs. No, there's no way of hiding behind a keep like you would if you were the Abbasids or the French. You only have these outposts, and he has very finite numbers of them. These Magos, you have to wonder, if Nevix waited, if he built up 1 or 2 more, could this have been a little bit better? Should he have shifted onto the eco line when he saw it? There's so many ifs, buts, and maybes, but right now, the only one that matters is Lenok is looking ahead. Trip Mangonel being built. And all of a sudden, the eco lead is being realized. Now, being 13 eco units ahead, having a clear military differential in his favor as well, Lenok will look to move in and close out this game. Nevix once more into the breach, probably only once more. Too much is exposed on the front. If he falters here, if he surrenders this area over, he more or less surrenders the game. Brace comes out, baits them in, goes over the Magos instead. Mago shots coming out, forcing Nevix to fall back further. And that means he's sacrificing the Mangonels. The Spirals aren't up. I don't think it's good enough. Nevix has surrendered the most critical area of his base. The step redoubt is going to be nullified. Irony sets in. It's just what he done to Lenok several minutes ago will be done to him. And with no way to gather additional gold, no way to rebuild a siege army, it looks like Nevix has no way in hell of coming back into this game. And understandably, when the villagers go idle, they go AFK, you know what's coming next. A type of GG and a tap out as Lenok will reign supreme on King of the Hill. Oh. Really interesting play out of Nevix. Gotta give credit to Lenok where credit is due. Like, he understood and exploited his opponent to the maximum. I think that heavy investment in crossbowmen definitely paid off. And I think the biggest issue to look back at for Nevix is like a combination of this stone outcropping placement, right? Kind of screwing him over. He admitted that himself. I think also not like wrapping onto the TC line that I don't think he noticed until much later due to a lack of vision. And I think that's like the biggest lesson here, right? Like outside of the optimization around Oovoos, which I think we'll get into in a sec, I think the other big detail is like because you don't have vision maintained, because you don't have a few scouts coming out, and you don't have the snitches in place, you don't necessarily know about that eco expansion quick enough to fully punish it when Lenok's weakest. I do feel like Nevix could have fairly easily had this game. He admitted himself he should have been playing around Sacred Site. I think the other details, after he denies the step redoubt, he needs to force Leenock to come out uncomfortably instead of going in further. I think when you go in further, you naturally give Leenock the ability to like overextend you, and that's kind of what we saw happen there. But most notably, more so than anything else in that game, I think it was the optimization around Oovoo play that mattered a lot. It gave Leenock an initial edge. It made it so that Nevix had to keep looking back at his own Oovoo to protect it, and I think that kind of caused this uncomfortable motion where you slightly missed your timings, and that was something that Nevix was like, you know, very admitting about. Like, he should have actually had the Oovoo close to his base. I think if he does, especially this quicker feudal age timing, he looks better than Leenock. I think he looks stronger at that point in the game, because also it scales up his pastures. We already mentioned the amount of additional wood he spent there just to match Leenock's production rate of sheep, because he had his underneath an Oovoo. And it shows you just how much difference an Oovoo can make even after the nerfs to that element of Mongol play. It's such a critical element to your economy and your military, so you really have to maximize it wherever you can.